Hello Gears and Gaming fans, and welcome to another Gears Intel YouTube video. This is going to be a bit of a freestyle, so as you may or may not know, it is the 10th anniversary of Gears of War Judgment, which is a Gears of War spin-off game that came out in 2013, obviously being 10 years. And yeah, we're doing some stuff on Gears Intel for the game. We are actually going to be covering the game for the podcast, but that is a bigger it's a bigger undertaking than the thing that I wanted to do today and some other stuff that I've got planned. On the podcast, for anybody that's listened, we get into fairly in-depth detail. We've never covered a game yet, and it's Gears of War Judgment is going to be the first game that we've covered. So it's going to be interesting because it's going to be slightly different from what we've done so far. But the plan is to get into some big detail on it. And we're actually going to be doing a couple of episodes. We're going to be doing an episode for the campaign and an episode for the multiplayer. So look out for that very soon. It is coming. But yeah, unfortunately, we can't get those podcast episodes out for the actual anniversary, which hopefully, if all goes well, this video should be going out on the 19th, which is the 10-year anniversary. Yeah, so the podcasts won't be out, but they are coming, and we'll have like a longer term celebration for Gears of War Judgment. But in the meantime, what I wanted to do today, this is going to be, as I said, a bit of a content is a bit freestyled here. I don't have a script. All I have is your responses. So last year on Twitter, I did a series of tweets on the Gears Intel account, which covered, so I covered every single game. I think I did a few characters as well. So what I did was I did a tweet that said, tell me one thing you liked about said game. And then lots of people replied with things that they liked. And that was like my way to just kind of, promote positive conversation for Gears of War. But on the flip side of that, I did something a little bit spicy as well. And after 24 hours of people replying with one thing they liked, I did do a tweet that said, now tell me one thing you disliked. Now, just to be clear, I do not encourage toxic criticism of the games. People that just say, this is shit, or that's crap, or fuck that game. I'm not really interested in that. However, what I am interested in is valid, pure fan criticism that comes from, a place of love and authenticity and is constructive. So, for example, you may say, I don't really like what they did with the controls in Gears of War Judgment. It messed with what I expect from Gears. That's like a totally cool piece of criticism. Great, it's not for you. But, comments like, it's shit because it didn't star Marcus Phoenix. It's just like, it's fine if you're disappointed it didn't star Marcus and maybe elaborate on that, but to just say something's shit without kind of giving some deeper reason, I have no interest in that. So I wanted to promote discussion. I wanted to promote discourse, if you like, for maybe want of a better phrase. I like debate and I like discussion, and that was my way of doing it. So the tweets I did they got loads of responses. Now, we are just a small part of the Gears of War fandom, but I like to think that, there is a nice little pool of people that interact with our tweets and engage with our content. So what I'd like to do is now start using those tweets in a series of content which will essentially be, what did the fans think, or what do the fans think about this game or this character? And we'll do, the likes and dislikes. So today, all I'm going to do really is go through the replies, most of them, I should say, and respond to them and give my thoughts as well, and give you guys another opportunity to comment and let me know your feedback as well if you missed it the first time round last year. And yeah, because it's 10 years of Gears of War Judgment, which, to be honest, I just can't believe it's 10 years. I thought, let's start with Gears of War Judgment. Sorry, tripping over my words. And yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. So I have my setup here, which has the Twitter browser window. As you can see, I'm just going to scroll through, have a read, see what people said. I can't recall. I think I remember coming away from this Judgment stuff thinking there was quite a lot of positive replies. And for a game that has often been divisive in the fandom, it was really nice to see. Yeah, I personally really like Judgment, and on the podcast episode, we're going to be elaborating, a lot more, me, Alex, and David, a lot more about what we liked, what we disliked, story, gameplay, all that kind of lovely stuff. But today, it's just nice and simple. One thing you liked about Gears of War Judgment, and then one thing you disliked. So, let's get going. So here we go. Here's the tweet that I started with. Okay, this one's going to be interesting. One of the most polarizing entries in the series. Let's hear one thing you liked about Gears of War Judgment. For me, I liked a lot, but one thing that sticks out was the introduction of free-for-all. And yeah, this is again something I'm not going to get into hugely today because we're going to talk about it on the podcast. I really loved free-for-all. It was a fresh mode that, I was happy to welcome to Gears of War. It just kind of framed things in a different way, and I know people are very protective about squad battling and being part of a team, but that's still there. Those modes were still there. I loved free for all, so that was one thing I liked. I liked lots of things, but that was what stuck out at the time. So let's have a look here. So first, so Mr. Andrew Morava. So those of you might know Andrew is actually involved with the Gears of War franchise. I believe he has rejoined the Coalition and is involved in story and like lore coordination and stuff like that, and has previously worked on the franchise as well. So big shout out to Andrew for getting involved. So one thing Andrew liked, Judgment wasn't as bad as people make it out to be. It definitely stumbled in some important aspects, but there was still some good there. For me, the introduction of Garen Paddock, such a well-written, interesting and likeable character. Absolutely. So I'm currently replaying through Gears of War Judgment for the podcast and for some Let's Plays. And yeah, I have to agree, Paddock is standout in the game, along with some other characters, which I'm not going to elaborate on now. And I think that's a completely fair shout. So here we have Raw, Mr. Raw himself. Big up Raw. So it was the first game to implement free-for-all. Also, Overrun was amazing, and the beautiful breach shot. Hard to argue. So at Merc Mistake on Twitter says, I liked playing from Baird's perspective, knowing more about his squad, and it was a different style of gameplay. I enjoyed it. Yeah, so Judgment, as I've often said, presents a bit more of an arcadey style gameplay. And yes, Marcus isn't the focus. Baird is the focus, I suppose, but what's kind of unique about Judgment is it spends a lot of time with the other characters as well, because they each give their testimony. So yeah, I liked playing from Baird's perspective. So we have Kuba Grabowski. Sorry, it's bad enough, like I get nervous talking on camera anyway, and then I've got to read out names and stuff. I'm always going to stumble over the words. So, in inverted commas, many. I guess that's a nickname. But yes, shout out to Kuba. Always getting involved. Overrun. Loved it then and loved it now. We'll play it once in a while with our Gears of War community. Absolutely. Overrun. So, yeah, Overrun has not been seen in the series since, if I recall. It'd be great to bring that back. I know people wanted it back for Gears 5, but yeah, it's a shame. Here we have the Hive HQ. So this is Collins from the Hive. Big shout out to the Hive, who have been big supporters of myself and Gears Intel and all the other projects that I work on. And I know that Collins from the Hive is a big Gears fan. So one thing he liked, everything bar the controller changes. It was perfect multiplayer, cool new weapons, fun events, faster. I enjoyed the elevation and maps. It gets more hate due to the story. It's kind of like putting a pineapple on pizza meme. Once one person makes a meme, everyone follows them. I mean, yeah, like, I will say, when Judgment came out and I saw... Now, what's funny is Judgment received really good reviews from critics. I think it was praised for, the fresh takes that it did for gameplay and stuff. After after Gears of War 3, it was like, are we just going to keep doing more of the same? So Judgment took a few left turns, and it was praised for that. It was praised as being performance-wise and running incredibly well and looking really nice. And I could not understand the hate to the game. I love story and I love things about the game like everybody. I guess I get why people are protective. I really do. I'm just not that protective about that stuff. There's very few things in, entertainment, like games and movies and stuff that I'm protective about. So it doesn't really bother me when they change. I like to see... I'm happy for them to try and do anything. So Judgment tried a few new things, and I was on board with it. If you don't like it, it's like, okay, fine, maybe I'll just stick to playing Gears 3. But there was some hatred for it back in the day. And then, yeah, it's particularly these days, there is a bit of a mob mentality, I suppose, with memes and criticism. So, yeah, but I'm not going to get too much into that right now. Collins also forgot to mention the Reaper. I want to see some of the maps make a comeback too. Is it Library? I think it's Library where the Reaper appears, or you can do the little glitch thing. Or it's not a glitch, it's like an Easter egg where you shoot the piece of paper and stuff, and it spawns the Reaper. That was awesome. I think the map is Library. I loved the Reaper too. Like, completely non-canon, because it's like it gets into the sort of spooky wooky paranormal-y stuff, which isn't what Gears is. Excuse me. But like, the Reaper is badass. I mean, just look at him. So yeah, fair shout on the Reaper too. Mr. Buck 89, the sticky grenades were elite. Okay. Harrison Good, Overrun was amazing. Was an amazing game mode. Would love for it to return one day, but for some reason TC won't use good game modes like this. Yeah, I think the Coalition use good game modes, but yeah, they unfortunately haven't re-implemented Overrun yet. Also, we have Mantis HD on Twitter. I love the introduction of Free For All, and Overrun. Had fun with the campaign too. Already there's a trend in these replies. Overrun and Free For All. At QBZ24 says, the most consistent shotty in Gears. Now, I can't really agree or disagree, because I think I'd have to do some comparisons. I don't really remember the... I am playing Judgment at the moment, and I haven't played Gears 5 for a while. I'd need to sort of boot up the games and compare them side by side and see what I think about it. But I mean, it's fair. It's I'll take that on board and I'll think about that the next time I'm using the shotgun, and then I jump across to a different game and see what that's about. So yeah, one thing that he liked. Then we have Elite Hunter. Campaign was really good. I liked the Judgment part of the campaign. I liked the idea of playing as a different character, and each character has his or her own unique story. I wish they would do the same in Gears 6, so we can have multiple character storylines instead of focusing on one. I mean, I'm not against that. There've been a lot of criticisms about the story of recent games, and again, that's another thing we're going to talk more about in future. But yeah, why not? I think something the games always do is try to increase scope and do things, take stuff to the next level from a tech point of view. Multiple stories, multiple campaigns. I don't want to get into Resident Evil 6 territory where there's a campaign for every single character and it becomes so ridiculously convoluted that it's just kind of dull and not enjoyable. So Wedding Coder 598, the marks are Mark II, the cutscenes, the characters and the designs, the settings. Judgment is my favourite game. It kicked so much ass at times. Now, I just asked for one thing that fans liked. Wedding Coder 598 gave us plenty of things there, so thank you for that. At Paul Levo, I like the introduction of the collateral snipe. People bash Judgment a lot. I don't consider it to be a good game, but I believe it to be more functional than 4 and 5, so I don't think it deserves the criticism it gets. It was bad for its time, but it's not the worst anymore. I mean, I don't think it was bad for its time. I think it was good for its time. Whether it delivered, the Gears of War that people wanted at the time, I think that's kind of a completely fair question. Whether it was a bad game, I wouldn't call it a bad game. Absolutely not. Demon Slayer Marcus, I'll give you that. Overrun multiplayer. Yep, Overrun again. Lucky Lambent, weapon balance. Shane, high power. Free for all and collateral snipes. The free for all one shot, one kill you could actually play with friends was my overall favourite event. Oculus Diablo. Oculus Diaboli. Free for all and the cosmetics were cool. Now that is going to be a spicy one, because one of the criticisms I often saw was, how Judgment was the sort of first game to implement more brightness and color, and particularly with the cosmetics, you would get the, you'd get the. It might have been the first game to have like the Day of the Dead stuff and like, the sort of neon color skins, which was, again, like, I don't mind it. I think it's just multiplayer cosmetics. It's just fun. I think asking for maybe modes where you can switch cosmetics off is not unfair. Maybe not a, unfair proposal, because there is an argument to be made that they can be distracting and, ruin the sort of atmosphere. I get all that. But at the end of the day, if you're just playing casual and you're just playing for fun, does it really matter? It doesn't matter to me. Sort of bright green is one of my favorite colors, so the neon green skins are something that I've always opted for. Hate me if you will, but that's just how I feel. And yeah, that's another thing. When it gets to the multiplayer episode of the podcast, we're definitely going to be talking more about them in depth. Hype Wall, campaign is heavily underrated. The prize box system was pretty cool. The game doesn't deserve the hate. Agree. Multiplayer Arms Race was great. Arms Race. Arms Races was it only in Judgment? Maybe it was. I'm old. I'm aging. My brain confuses facts sometimes, but I thought Arms Race was in 4 as well, wasn't it? I'm sure it was in 4. Was it in 5? Maybe it was introduced in Judgment. That's a good point. I'm going to have to remember to look into that, because I'm also a big fan of Arms Race. So yeah, thank you, Brad Allison. Great shout. Overrun, introduction of Paddock Sophia, the Bushka, and personally I liked most of the PvP maps. And then we have Vandalisms here, just showing his versus ranked on the leaderboards. Congratulations to you. Funky Reaper Cat, this is my favourite Gears, LMAO. Can't tell if you're being sincere or not, but thanks for the reply. This guy from Neil Pez, aka Viking on Twitter. Epic Reaper. Is this fan art? No, for a second there I thought MV Viking here had done some fan art, but I don't think it is. This looks like an old thumbnail from maybe a video or something like that he's made. But yeah, the Reaper, Epic Reaper. Eddie on Twitter, I really loved Overrun. It was so fun in my opinion. Yep. Level, the overall art direction is better than the original trilogies, with more colour while keeping the same tone. Almost like Gears being dark and gritty doesn't equal to Gears being only one shade of grey. Yeah, now this is a bigger conversation to have. Again, another thing we're going to get into more, but I liked the introduction of colour. I don't think we should overdo it. But I never felt I wasn't playing Gears of War. Yeah, conversation for another day. Bluff Khan on Twitter says, the armor color for multiplayer was incredibly good. I wish Coalition would bring it back for Gears 6. Sean K on Twitter, I absolutely love this game. The campaign was awesome, and so was the multiplayer. Jay Holt, it had more Gears of War 3 story, or had more story than Gears of War 3? Potentially. I think Judgment's quite a brief campaign, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it's shorter than 3, so yeah. Campaign format was great. Campaign format was great. Delivering the story to a tribunal opened up for the declassified system. This is how all games should be done. Now, how all games should be done? Well, no, I don't agree with that. The declassified system and the way the story is told in this, 100% loved it. The declassified feature is, I guess, one of the main selling parts about Judgment, and it's something that to this day, when I boot it up and play it, I think they nailed it with this feature, giving you the option to play something slightly different. And what that does for the story is kind of how you want to perceive it, because I think it's not necessarily changing the canon, it's just changing the way that they recount their testimony, which is part of the story and part of the canon. So yeah, love the declassify. Tim Lewis gameplay, graphics were good. Everything really. The story and the pacing were the issue. Okay. Super Baby brought back classic Hammerburst. Adrian Vicerius. Nothing this video... hold on. Nothing. This video... Here we go. Nothing. This video game, it never should have existed. The checks at the Call of Duty, the life you have in so little, you die as the COD, the executions of the... I mean, yeah. Adrian, not a fan of Gears of War Judgment. This is supposed to be the one thing you liked section. Seeing the war much earlier in the time climb was cool. I really enjoyed the variety, included the optional challenges that would not only give you an objective, but also give you more details, story details, if I recall. Light Shadow, the story, the characters, the places I liked. Here we go. The Shibboleth and its soundtrack. This thing is just awesome to me, despite me being a massive arachnophobe. The Big Don, I agree. The Breach Shot, that's all I can think of at the moment. Maybe if I were to jog my memory, I might be able to think of something else. The campaign, the story, multiplayer maps, Overrun, the weapon additions, and some good characters. See, again, I asked for just one thing people wanted, but, you know, Gears fans, they can't help themselves. There's loads to love about Judgment, so, yeah. Movement speed, free-for-all, jumping from high places. The jumping from high places, absolutely. That was a thing I did. So last year on the Gears Intel Twitter, I did do like some Judgment like facts and stuff like that. And I was highlighting some of the features of the game, and I definitely highlighted Declassify. Now, the jumping from high levels, that's why that's not something that's been carried on. I mean, I'm trying to think now. There is probably some points in the multiplayer today where you can drop from a high level. Again, sometimes with Gears, the games do sort of blur into one for me, and it's hard for me until I go back and play to refresh my mind. Obviously, up until Judgment, you couldn't do that. There might have been some places in the campaign you could. Now, for the other games as well, it might be the same. There might just be places in the campaign that you can jump down, but I remember playing like Rooftops, for example, on Judgment. I think it's Rooftops. And that's very much about sort of going up those stairs and coming across the roof and coming back down and being able to, if you couldn't jump off there, you essentially would come to dead ends, I think. And so there's nowhere to go. So it's kind of essential to keeping things flowing. And yeah, being able to just do what is like, what makes sense from a physics point of view, I think is fine. And it does annoy me in games when there's like, you know, there's like a 2-foot high wall, ledge, or bump in the road, and your character can't move. This is the same sort of thing. It's just like, well, it's a jump. It's a jump that I could make in real life. It's a jump that in the world that this character is in, they should be able to make. It wouldn't kill them. Why can't I make the jump? And it's then, yeah, you're just bound by some weird gaming rules, which sometimes is fine. More often than not, it annoys me. So when they added the jumping from high places, I was well on board with that. I really liked the extra challenges. Overrun, it was fun, like how Paddock could climb walls or whatever, but someone like Baird could. I like the story actually much better than the Gears 4 story. Two things actually, Overrun and the way each section has a challenge. The Aftermath campaign, yes. So Aftermath is that's the section of the campaign where it jumps forward, right? And you're playing a section of Gears 3, I think. Yes, very good. Overrun, Breach Shot, map verticality, poor execution though. Paddock and the Marks of Rifle, for such a whatever feeling game, it sure brought in some absolute standouts. You know, that's a kind of fair way to describe it. I've got some very poignant, I've got some succinct ways of describing Gears Judgment, which I'm going to save for the podcast. This sort of, this doesn't completely come in line with my overall thoughts, but yeah, I'm looking forward to the in-depth conversation about Judgment. So please, when we put that out, do come and listen to it. Thing I liked about Judgment was the Omen challenges. Forgot what they were called. That's the Declassify stuff. You could do the campaign and get the extra stars. Really added another level of gameplay and strategy to the game. Absolutely, Judgment is very arcadey. Again, some people might not like that. I was happy to play Gears in a slightly different way while I waited for the next mainline entry. declassified mode, overrun game mode, weapon skins, character skins. Controversial to some there, but Jose, love the weapon skins. Cat's Bane, I like knowing more about Baird and what he's all about. The campaign was fun too. Dutchy, when the credits rolled after I finished that trash ass game. This is the criticism I'm talking about that I'm not interested in. I'm going to leave that in the video just to give you an example of stuff for the future. If you're engaging with me on Twitter, if you're engaging with us on the podcasts or anything, you bring us stuff like this, I'm not going to engage. I'm engaging right now because, like I said, this is a bit of freestyled content, and maybe I haven't been explicit about it in the past. I'm being explicit about it now. I'm not interested in criticism like that. I just look at it and I laugh. I can't take you seriously. It's cool. Your opinion, great. I think you've wasted your time sending that tweet, but, you know, I don't believe you've added to the conversation. Always try to add to the conversation. Overrun was a mode that should have been a staple mode for all future Gears games. Better than Horde mode, in my opinion. Now, that's the first part of that I definitely agree with. Matt Pate. Mate Pate. I thought the storytelling was good. Sorry if I'm reading your usernames and getting them wrong, by the way. You might have gathered from listening to me that I am not the most eloquent person on planet Earth, so do forgive me. I thought storytelling was good. I also liked that you could do the challenges to make it more difficult for each level. Made a fun change of pace. Absolutely. Challenge missions in the campaign. Baird. Overrun. I also liked the story. Overrun was a blast. Really addictive multiplayer. Made sleep totally irrelevant. Shout out to Bibboy Jesse. Active Scorcher in the game is most OP weapon of all time. Loved the Scorcher in multiplayer. I think... was it the first time Scorcher was in multiplayer? Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was in Gears 3, but I don't think the Scorcher came at the start. No, I think I'm thinking of Gears 4 or 5 where they added the Scorcher later, but yeah. So is it Gears 5 then where they added the Scorcher later and they added Free-for-All later? I think they took, you know, a fair bit of influence from Judgment with Gears 5. Overrun, that's it. Just the story and characters, to be honest. I loved the arcade stars mode and wish it was in future games. Absolutely. There we have it. That's the replies. I think we had about 70 responses. I did skip over a few, and I skipped over some of the nonsense replies as well. But yeah, so that's the things the fans, at least the fans on the Gears Intel Twitter, liked about Gears of War Judgment. What did I say at the start? Free-for-all. Another thing, which I'm just going to give you a little preview now of when we get to our multiplayer discussion. Another thing I do love... Sorry, not multiplayer, just the overall Gears Judgment discussion. Something I love about the games is when you're playing the campaign, you will be playing through a section and, you know, killing enemies or whatever, and a little sort of score or stats bar will appear in the bottom and tell you, like, how many headshots you've got in that section. And it would say, like, I guess... the top 3 on your friends list, how many headshots they've got in that section. So even when you weren't playing online multiplayer, you had this little kind of competitive thing with your friends list, and you could see who was getting the most kills in an area or most headshots or whatever. Now that I absolutely love. Again, very arcadey. For some people that might sort of ruin the cinematic sort of story immersion side of things, but you know, it's a video game. It's fine. I love that stuff. If you want to turn it off, I think there should be an option to turn it off. I'm all for lots of different options in gaming these days, and the more options you have, the better. I love that, though, because I'm someone that loves the multiplayer to a degree. I often play by myself, so it's nice that even when I'm playing alone, I get a little kind of community thing pop up that makes me feel I'm still sort of playing against people in little ways, and yeah, you can have challenges amongst your friends, even when you're just playing the campaign by yourself. So that was another thing I liked. So moving on. Yesterday's Judgment tweet brought a lot of great love for the game. Now, do I dare, for the next 24 hours, let's hear one thing you disliked about Gears of War Judgment. What would have made it a little better for you? So I didn't know how this tweet was going to go. I don't think it got as much engagement as the... No, it got about half the engagement as the one thing you liked tweet. So just saying, more people seem to like things, at least in my little community, more people like things about Gears of War Judgment than disliked. But then again, sometimes people dislike stuff, they just don't want to say anything. And that's why I said at the start, like, doing these tweets, I almost didn't do them because I don't like to promote just kind of overt negativity. This was me trying to promote just discussion and productive criticism. Give us a chance to get something off our chest, but in, you know, a nice way. Not interested in the toxic, shitty responses that you see sometimes, but hopefully we get something out of this. So, let's go have a look. One thing you disliked about Gears of War Judgment. Let's look at the replies on the Gears Intel Twitter. Shout out to Raw again. There's not a Judgment 2. Said it. I think we could just sort of wrap it up there. I gave a little I agree gif there. So here's Collins from the Hive again. The D-pad change. Yes. So what did they do? So obviously classically in Gears you use up, down, left and right on the D-pad to switch between your weapons. What Judgment did obviously was try to, I guess, emulate the COD style of weapon switching, where I think you just press Y to switch the weapons and you press the bumper button to throw your grenade, and I don't think you can change that. These days games have a lot more button mapping features. I don't think Judgment did. It's a fair shout. It's an absolutely fair shout. And you see, yeah, I've got my reply there. The D-pad change to a more COD-like thing was definitely annoying. You know, it's annoying in the first half an hour, 45 minutes of gameplay. Once you get used to it, is it that annoying? Not really. I played COD as well. I'm not a hardcore COD player, so it didn't take me too long to just kind of do that switch in your brain when you think, okay, I'll just do something different. But I completely agree and appreciate that. I think, okay, I'm playing a Gears game. Why change such a fundamental part of the controls? And I think it was done. There's probably a technical reason that's going over my head, and if anybody who was involved with the game would like to elaborate, please do get in touch and give us some insight. But in my head, when I see something like that, I just think they are trying to appeal to the already more established control system. I don't play loads of shooters, but I think most of them had the same kind of control system as COD. So, and Judgment came out at like probably the peak of COD. Maybe it was sort of starting to drop off the peak a little bit, and then it came back a little bit later. So Judgment would have come out Black Ops 2 time, maybe? Again, the COD games blur into one for me. So it's 2013. Coming off the back of Modern Warfare 3, I think we are, right? It's coming off the back of Modern Warfare 3, or around the same time. Modern Warfare 3 was huge. Whether people loved it as much as the others or not, it's neither here nor there. But COD is still this juggernaut of the shooter genre at the time. So, yeah, maybe they just thought, let's just try and appeal to those players that don't want to have to learn a new control system. But while doing that, let's piss off the hardcore Gears fans. So, yeah, you can't win. They've got to sell games at the end of the day. They have to sell. The controller change annoyed me, but the fact you can only have two guns, and of course the human versus human multiplayer was a bad choice. The way the campaign was styled, it was like each part was a mission and you'd need to see a scoreboard every time. I like they tried something new, but it just slowed the game down a lot rather than it being one nit chopped up into 10-15 minute segments. Yeah, I mean, again, it's a wider conversation. I take the points. As for one thing people disliked, and again, we get lots of things they disliked. So I can see how people would be frustrated at the complete change of campaign style. I enjoyed the freshness of it. I'm not going to say I loved it with all my heart. I definitely prefer the other ways of telling the story. But yeah, it's just about getting into that headspace of, okay, I'm playing something different. So yeah, it's a whole bigger conversation. Jacob Road, right, I don't have Twitter Translate on right now, unfortunately. Usually the translate thing is right there and I can click it and it just tells me what people are saying. Sorry, I can't translate your tweet. Kim says no multiplayer Locust, 4 maps at launch. No, again, it's fair. This is kind of the fair criticism. Why they chose to have no locus in the multiplayer and wanted to make it more of a red versus blue humans thing. Again, maybe just taking influence from other shooters, Halo and COD, humans versus humans. That's all I can sort of try to make sense of it. Do I like that? No. Does it ruin the game for me? No, not at all. Dylan, lack of characters for multiplayer and the 2 weapons is really only thing I didn't like. I will continue to be one of the few who actually like Judgment. Well, Dylan, judging by the replies I'm reading today, there's plenty of Gears fans who like Judgment, so you're not alone, mate. Paul Levo, I want to say that I disliked the concept of the vertical drops. I didn't like how it made the game feel, but I think my biggest issue with Judgment was the speed of the melee. The 2-piece was pathetic on that game. I always feel like the 2-piecing was worse in like Gears 1 to 3. I haven't revisited the Gears Judgment multiplayer yet in my new playthrough, but I'm going to bear that in mind because it might be a completely fair point. Yeah, I'm going to look into that. Demon Slayer, no active reloads and execution in multiplayer. Meh. Yeah. Level, the arcade-like structure of the campaign completely killed all the potential for an actual story with actual characters. Paddock only stands out because of he's different from the start. No one gets actual development. It's awful. Level, I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate your reply. That's cool. And Level is always getting involved with the tweets we put out. So yes, huge shout out to them. That being said, I disagree. And I will elaborate more on that when we get to the podcast. Controls and weapon swapping. Paddock bot, he seemed to spend the majority of the match just stood in a corner aiming at the floor. Damn it, Paddock. Mush so I can spawn in. COD controls. Thing I dislike most about Gears Judgment is there's not a sequel. Hey. Agreed. Star system and campaign really ruined the flow. Okay, so we have another similar reply here. Sure, it was a great arcade experience, but I'd rather a fully curated campaign instead. Keep that stuff out of a first playthrough. Yeah. I get that. The idea of potentially all that arcade stuff being a separate campaign option or something you unlock, I guess I'm not opposed to that. Would people have replayed Judgment just for that? I'm not sure. Yeah, it's up for debate. It's there's some more trends appearing here. The controls and the 2-weapon thing. And then for some people, this star system and campaign nature is what they didn't like. Again, it's not Gears. It was very different to what Gears had done. So I do appreciate that people don't like it. I don't want to say I'm on the fence about it. But yeah, I'm going to talk more about it in future. Melee. The controls are different than any other Gears. They made the cold train a small train. Did they? Was he a bit smaller in that? I have to do some character model comparisons. One thing is the chainsaw bayonets existing before it was invented lore-wise, as well as the button mapping regarding the weapons. Now, yeah, I remember reading about that at the time. And again, I love the lore. I love the story. I'm not someone that is too precious about it. I think things like that with the chainsaw bayonets, I just think for the purposes of a video game, I'm happy to let it go. Which everyone has their line and, you know, where they draw a line on these sort of things. I'm trying to think of other gaming examples where they do this, because this is not rare. This stuff happens in video games all the time. And I always say, I'm a Resident Evil fan. I don't think Capcom give the slightest shit about canon and lore in Resident Evil. They change stuff all the time and forget stuff happened and mix things up. Happens all the time. Does it completely ruin my enjoyment of Resident Evil? No, not at all. It's fair. It's fair that people want to criticize that. It just personally doesn't bother me too much. I think it's such a small aspect of the story that I'm sort of balancing up video game experience and story playing. Yeah, again, I'm sort of ambivalent towards it. I agree and I don't agree. Lots to think about. Suko Tashi, I liked that they tried to give some backstory for Baird and Cole. Unfortunately, it doesn't really explain their friendship at all, other than they were in a squad together. Would have loved if they actually showed how they truly became brothers. Yeah, they definitely do advance some of the Baird and Cole stuff. Could we do with more? Absolutely. As I said, I think so. Judgment is a fairly brief campaign compared to the others. Could we have done with a different opening chapter that told more about their relationship? But yeah, sure. Control scheme, star system didn't feel as disrupted for the story as the open world of 5. Yeah, I agree with that. That exhausted me, and I love Skyrim. Yeah, the open world nature or lack of 5 is again something we'll get into in future. Ash Williams, you can't plant grenades. Yes, so you can plant grenades, but you can just stick them to players when they run by you, right? Or you can throw them. You throw them and they stick to people. Yeah, but you can't plant. The change in weapon swaps to be more like COD, also only having 2 guns. I legit would have played Judgment more if they kept the classic weapon swap from literally every other Gears game. Fair. I really don't get what all the hate is for. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, Khan was a kind of a letdown. Other than that, oh yeah, almost forgot Blue versus Red without Locust was whack. Like whack AF. Yeah. Campaign was way too short, but good. Finally got free-for-all in multiplayer. Yeah, it's nice to see more people loving the free-for-all, because I feel like... I remember when they teased it for Gears 5. I can't remember who one of the game designers was who was working on the game, but he did a tweet, like a joke tweet about introducing free-for-all for Gears 5. And I think people sort of lost their minds and got a bit angry because they were like, no, we don't want that, we don't want that. And I remember I replied and I was like, actually, I would love that. And he replied to me and was like, can you tell me why you would love the free-for-all mode? Again, a conversation I'm going to get into more in future. I feel like I keep saying that, but yeah, I'm just trying to keep focus on the point of this is what you guys liked and disliked. I'm not going to turn this into my opinion piece, but free-for-all, it allowed players like me that play on my own to shine a bit more and not have to rely on my teammates. Although Gears is all about teamwork, squad-based, I would sometimes have people I couldn't play with or didn't know. I'm not a huge fan of playing with completely random people. I feel like I like to rather have a connection and know the people that I'm playing with. I get much more enjoyment that way. You can't always squad up. So when I would play by myself and do really well and the rest of my team would do terrible, it would frustrate me. So free-for-all took that issue away, and I was glad when they brought that back to Gears 5. I'm not necessarily good at free-for-all, but it's, you know, I enjoyed the different type of gameplay. I don't think I've ever finished first in Gears 5 free-for-all. Maybe like once. The gameplay animations looked quite shitty. The melee was sped up, that looks cartoony. They removed one frame of the roll animation, which made it look jerky compared to Gears of War 3's version. If it weren't for those, Gears of War Judgment would have been my second favourite. Some very specific technical criticisms there. I'm not going to argue because, again, I've not done any kind of comparison for this stuff for a long time, but it's another thing I'm going to bear in mind in some of the upcoming coverage that we're going to do. Yes, the 2 weapons thing is extremely annoying. Yes, the lack of characters is really bad, but I think most offensive thing is the lack of multiplayer maps. Granted, I don't have the DLC packs, but still the selection is limited. Yeah, Gears Judgment is definitely a smaller package, a smaller game. It wasn't cheap to produce. It was still expensive because it did look great and it ran smoothly, so there was a lot to be said for that, but it was a smaller package. I don't think it was priced as full price, so, you know, back in the day, I'd have to look into this, but so like when Gears 3 came out, what was that? Was that $49.99 or $45.99? I think Gears was a $39.99 game. It was ever so... I think Gears Judgment, was a $39.99 game, ever so slightly cheaper. And I've told my story in the podcast about buying 3 copies, and I sent them to my brothers so we could all play. You couldn't change weapons with the D-pad. I know, Ash. That was it. That's the replies. That's the one thing you disliked. Now, I'm glad that tweet didn't get out of hand and didn't have as many angry fans in it as I thought it would. These series of tweets I did, I'm quite pleased with. I think we got a nice broad scope of replies. The Gears community these days is relatively niche. It's thank you everybody for getting involved. Thank you for taking the time to reply to these tweets. There's going to be more videos like this in future where I go through the other stuff that I've done. And the plan is to do a big kind of like, I want to separate this. I'm trying to get all this into some data forms and stuff like that to give some percentages about what people said. Basically, it's just a survey, really. And I could have used like a survey website, which would have made my life a lot easier. But I don't think people would have filled that in. I just wanted to give people a chance to reply. So thank you for everybody that did. What have we learned? Well, I think just from looking back at these replies, Gears of War Judgment isn't as disliked as some people might think it is. Lots of trends in the likes and dislikes. So clearly with the dislikes, the control changes, lack of locus in multiplayer, lack of maps. Fair comments, absolutely fair comments. The likes, people are generally sort of on board with my feelings where they tried to do new things, declassify. Although we had some dislikes for the arcade stuff, other people did like it as well. The smoothness of the game, the pacing, seeing more about Baird, getting Paddock and Sophia as well. I'm surprised more about Sophia didn't come up because I think she's a big part of the Judgment legacy, But yeah, just really interesting to see. I'm going to leave it there for this video. As I said, it's a bit of a freestyle. I wanted to get some stuff out for the Judgment 10th anniversary. Can't believe it's been 10 years. Looking ahead for Gears, are we going to get a Judgment 2? No, probably not. Are we going to get more spin-offs? Absolutely. I'm sure we will. We've already had Tactics. Now, as for spin-offs, that did things a lot more differently than what Judgment did. It's a completely different style of game. So we're going to be talking about Tactics in future as well. But would we like to have seen more from some of the characters? From Sophia, for example, yes. We're not going to get a Judgment 2. Would we like a Sophia spin-off game? Let me know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please like and subscribe and all the stuff you're supposed to do on YouTube. Come and check out the podcast episodes. You can find them on the YouTube channel. Watch the video versions, or if you'd rather, you can listen in all the usual podcast feeds, and download them. Give us a rating and a review, please do. Follow us on Twitter if you're not already, at Gears Intel, where I will share lots of other fantastic Gears stuff, not just from me, but from other creators in the community. Honestly, like not just the people like making videos and streaming, but the fan art, the cosplay stuff. It's just, it's an insane amount of talent out there in the Gears community, and I'm always trying to share that and lift everybody up, and that's what I'd like you all to do too. So come and get involved in the conversation and tell us what you loved about Gears Judgment and one thing you didn't like about it. Look forward to our podcast episode soon, and until then, remember the Fallen.